Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scott Bertram.
We continue a series of episodes from presentations delivered at Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence seminars. The Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence, an outreach of the Hillsdale College K-12 Education Office, offers educators the opportunity to deepen their content knowledge and refine their skills in the classroom. These one-day conferences are hosted during the academic year in cities across the nation and feature presentations by Hillsdale College faculty, K-12 office staff, and leaders in the Hillsdale network of member schools. There is no cost to attend, and attendees may earn professional development credits. Currently, the Hoogland Center is hosting a series exploring the art of teaching a variety of subjects. To learn more about upcoming events, visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues in this most curious yet necessary endeavor of education. I'd like to begin with the premise that to lead a classical school in the 21st century is to find oneself something like a monastic scribe, scratching away in the flickering candlelight while 100 printing presses thunder in the distance. To insist upon Latin declensions and Aristotelian logic when the world is fixated on AI chatbots and Google Docs with embedded links may initially seem like a relic of a bygone era, taken to an almost comical extreme. And yet, here I stand, headmaster at Cincinnati Classical Academy, prepared in the brief span of 15 minutes to set forth some of the reasons why I lead a classical school. I lead a classical school because there are truths that must be known, truths that shape not just the intellect, but the soul. Not merely the facts that crowd the pages of standardized tests, not the transient data that fills our screens before vanishing into the ether, but the things that must be known in the depths of a cultivated soul. The tragedy of Hamlet, the geometry of Euclid, the virtues extolled by Aquinas, the poetry of Homer's blind sight. These are not relics of an irrelevant past. These are the living roots of civilization itself, roots that must be tended and must be nourished. I lead a classical school because there is a great forgetting underway. You see it in the dull eyes of a child who has never been made to memorize a poem, in the hunched shoulders of a student so burdened by the jargon of pedagogy that he has lost all sense of the sublime. We speak now of skills and competencies as if the human mind were a mere apparatus to be tuned for maximum efficiency, as if the grand and golden inheritance of Western civilization were some expendable luxury, an ornamental frieze on the facade of a crumbling building instead of its foundation. I lead a classical school because a generation unmoored from its own intellectual patrimony is a generation that will be led docile and oblivious into whatever mechanized dystopia awaits it. History, in fact, is littered with the wreckage of cultures that forgot themselves, that turned away from the labor of preserving and passing on their highest thoughts. their most exquisite expressions of beauty and truth. The once mighty Rome, having built an empire upon the twin pillars of virtue and law, decayed from within as civic duty gave way to decadence. The libraries of Alexandria, housing the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world, were left to burn. Their destruction not only an act of conquest, but a sign of a civilization that no longer knew how to guard its own inheritance. The grandeur of Byzantium, with its luminous mosaics and profound theology, faded as internal strife and complacency left it vulnerable to conquest. Even the flourishing culture of the Renaissance, which re-enkindled the intellectual fire of antiquity, eventually gave way to an age more interested in novelty than in wisdom, more enamored with dismantling tradition than with standing on its shoulders. Again and again, we see that when a culture ceases to value its own highest achievements, when it no longer sees itself as a steward of something greater than the present moment, it begins the slow, inevitable slide into oblivion. I lead a classical school because I don't want that to happen to us. William Shakespeare and Abraham Lincoln, a school that reads these is engaged in a resistance, in defiance, in the sacred duty of keeping the lamps lit while the winds howl outside. It's a conscious decision to stand before a class of students and say, you're not consumers. You're not data points. You're not future employees of some faceless technocracy. You are heirs, H-E-I-R-S, heirs. You are the children of Athens and Rome, of Jerusalem and Florence, of Shakespeare's England and Abraham's America. And if you do not receive what has been given to you, if you're not made to know it, to love it, to make it your own, then it will be lost, and you will be set aimlessly adrift. I lead a classical school in order to teach students to write by hand, because to write by hand is to think deliberately, to tether thought to the body, to slow down and dwell in language. In fact, the act of writing by hand reminds us that thinking is not a race, but a craft, one that requires the kind of stillness and focus that can only be found when the mind is fully engaged with the tactile rhythm of pen or pencil on paper. We also teach students to write in cursive, a beautiful bridge between the aesthetic and the intellectual. The hand, shaped by the mind, becomes the perfect instrument to articulate the delicate balance of beauty and purpose. We require students to take notes by hand in an organized way, and not simply as a form of transcription, not as a mechanical exercise where words are tapped out on a Chromebook or on a laptop. To take notes is to engage actively, to wrestle with the ideas as they unfold in real time, to sift, to select, to interpret. But beyond the page, beyond even the discipline of written thought, we ask our students to engage with the world in ways that demand both introspection and outward vision. We require them to memorize and recite poems, to inhabit the language of the past as a means of anchoring the mind to something eternal. These poems are not just collections of words to be memorized for a grade, but vessels that carry the wisdom of centuries, reminders that the soul of a nation, of a civilization, is preserved in verse. To recite these poems is to send thoughts backward and forward in time, creating a bridge between who we are and who we might be. In every act of learning, whether it be reading, writing, memorizing, or reciting, we promise. We promote the deliberate cultivation of the mind, the slow, thoughtful engagement with the world around us and within us, so that students may not merely exist, but understand, appreciate, and in time purposefully shape the world they inherit. I lead a classical school so that students may learn traditional grammar, including the practice of sentence diagramming. No, these are not punitive exercises. They are acts of restoration, acts of reassembling language so that the meaning is made clear, acts of reclaiming the power of language to convey truth. We teach students to read slowly, deliberately, carefully, not as passive consumers of text, but as seekers of truth, as analysts, as interpreters of what lies beneath the surface of every word. To read well is a skill that requires patience and precision, the ability to hear what the author has said and what the author meant, and in the space between to discover something vital and profound. And so we read the classic works of literature, not as lifeless relics of a past era, but as urgent voices speaking to us across time, voices that still have something vital to say. Poetry, too, as not as a mere art form, but as the medium through which we speak with the divine. We reread these texts because their truths are not exhausted. They linger, waiting for each generation to uncover the depths of meaning buried within. I lead a classical school because we study logic, and not only in logic classes. And yes, we have logic classes, but we also teach the logic of Latin, of mathematics, of geometry, and astronomy. The logic of language, where every sentence, every clause must follow its own rule in order to clearly convey meaning. The logic of geometry, where form and structure reveal the beauty of the universe in its simplest expressions. The logic of astronomy, where the stars themselves follow an order that mirrors the same rationality that governs language, geometry, and the laws of thought. We teach rhetoric, too, for without the power to speak clearly, to persuade, to call others to action, all the logic in the world remains inert. Each discipline sharpens the mind, forms a habit of thought, and prepares our students not for passive existence, but for active participation in a world that demands clarity, truth, and reason. I lead a classical school not merely to teach, but to guide students into the long, unbroken conversation of the arts, to train their hands and voices to join in. We begin in the earliest years with line and curve, with hue and form, with the precise geometry of perspective, the principles of design, proportion, unity, symmetry, are not mere abstractions, but pathways to an order that undergirds the world itself. And what better way to apprehend this order than through the study of those who came before? And that's why our curriculum is strewn with the works of Michelangelo and Caravaggio, of Rembrandt and Van Gogh. But art history is not a parade of static images, but an unfolding narrative where students, by encountering the past, come to see their own hands as capable of shaping the future. The same holds in music, where melody soaring above the structure of harmony becomes a means of participating in something ancient, enduring, and transcendent. Palestrina's polyphony, Bach's fugues, Mozart's operatic wit, these are living presences in classical school. At this point, Mr. Godey's probably back there wondering, why does any of this matter? Why should a student in the 21st century be troubled with the polyphony of Palestrina, the syllogisms of Aquinas, the sonnets of Shakespeare? What can a boy with a smartphone in his pocket and the sum total of all human knowledge at his fingertips possibly gain from diagramming sentences with a pencil and paper? The answer, of course, is that knowledge is not wisdom, that information is not understanding. To consult a search engine is not to know the restless spirit of Augustine, nor the tragic vision of Sophocles. To read a Wikipedia summary of Dante's Inferno is not to descend with him step by harrowing step into the abyss and to emerge trembling into the light of paradise. It is rather to mistake the map for the journey. I lead a classical school because the great conversation of Western civilization is not over, though its volume has been lowered to a whisper. I lead a classical school because there are still children whose souls have not been mechanized, whose imaginations have not yet been flattened by the dead weight of bureaucratic learning objectives. I lead a classical school because in a world addicted to novelty, someone must remind the young that there are perennial truths that are still worth knowing, that there is an inheritance waiting for them should they have the courage to claim it. I lead a classical school because education is not a formless pursuit of modern trends, but a timeless endeavor to shape minds and souls in the pursuit of goodness, beauty, and truth. I lead a classical school because we do not treat education as shapeless mass of 21st century skills, but rather as a deliberate cultivation of 7 pillars upon which true learning rests. We call them the 7 C's: curiosity, competency, creativity, culture, compassion, content-rich learning, and the character to uphold them all. Each one is a definite rebuke to the mechanization of the mind, each one a means of restoring the purpose of education itself. I lead a classical school to cultivate curiosity, not as idle amusement, but as the restless pursuit of wisdom. We demand competency, not for employability, but for the mastery of disciplines worthy of devotion. Creativity, not as self-indulgence, but as participation in the divine act of making. Culture, not as an optional elective, but as the breath of civilization itself. Compassion, not as sentiment, but as the moral order that binds human beings together. Content-rich learning, not as an afterthought, but as the inheritance that must be claimed and passed on. And at the heart of it all, character, the inner architecture without which all else collapses into dust. These are the marks of an educated mind. These are the marks of the classical student. I lead a classical school because our nation needs citizens who understand their history. Without knowledge of our past, we cannot navigate our present or plan for a prosperous future. When people disconnect from their history, they don't become forward-thinking pioneers. They become castaways. They drift through institutions they no longer understand, guided by leaders who value efficiency over wisdom and quick fixes over lasting solutions. I lead a classical school because a nation unmoored from its inheritance cannot cannot summon even the ghost of its former strength when the foundations crumble beneath the weight of slogans divorced from substance, of freedoms entrusted to those who wear them like borrowed garments with no understanding of their value or purpose. Studying important historical texts and grappling with the great ideas from Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem isn't just looking backward. It's essential for moving forward. Without memory, we lose our sense of responsibility. Without virtue, we lose our liberty. And without true education that forms character and understanding, we lose what makes America itself. I lead a classical school because to do otherwise, to surrender, to acquiesce, to allow the tide of forgetting to wash away even one more fragment of our inheritance would be quite simply unconscionable. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this lecture, we encourage you to visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu, for additional information on upcoming Hoogland Center events and other free resources for educators.